Have you ever, really wanted to reach this ultimate state of perfection, but then you were told that the only way to get there is by experiencing absolute nothingness?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a riddle, right?
Yeah.
The idea that you have to lose absolutely everything in order to, well, gain absolutely everything.
It is a massive paradox. Imagine you spend your entire life climbing the highest mountain in the world because you expect to find the ultimate treasure chest right at the peak.
Right. You put in all that work and endure the freezing cold.
Exactly. You scrape your hands on the rocks, and when you finally reach the summit and pry open the chest, it's completely empty. And your guide just smiles and says, "Congratulations, you found it."
I feel like most people would immediately ask for a refund right there. We are, you know, fundamentally wired as human beings to want tangible rewards.
Hmm.
We want visible proof of our efforts and a very clear destination.
We really do. But today's deep dive flips that entire expectation totally on its head. We're diving into a really fascinating philosophical text written by Su Feng on August 3, 2023. It's titled Emptiness is Ultimate Nirvana.
And our mission today is to distill this incredibly dense spiritual framework into clear, actionable aha moments for you. We're going to explore how the author takes ancient Buddhist concepts and attempts to connect them to a state of absolute, total freedom.
Yeah, this text caught my eye because it attempts to just completely dismantle traditional spiritual wisdom.
It really does take a sledgehammer to conventional interpretations. What's compelling about this text is that the author is actually attempting to provide a universal key to understanding existence itself.
It's a really bold claim.
It is, and the author uses a very specific, systematic argument to construct this framework. We're going to look at the underlying mechanics of how this philosophy suggests we actually reach enlightenment, rather than just talking about it in abstract terms.
Okay, let's unpack the starting point because the author begins with a massive swing. The text tackles one of the most famous spiritual texts in human history, the Heart Sutra.
Yeah, and claims that for centuries it has been entirely misunderstood and misread.
Right. The author argues that its true name shouldn't be the Heart Sutra at all. It should be the Nature Sutra.
And that distinction, that's really the foundation of everything else we're going to discuss today. When the author uses the word nature, they aren't talking about, trees or mountains and rivers.
Like the literal outdoors.
Exactly. Not the outdoors. They mean the intrinsic essence, the fundamental, unchangeable characteristics of things. The text points to the famous phrase from the sutra, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form."
Which people usually think is about the mind, right?
Right. For generations, practitioners have interpreted this as a commentary on the state of the mind. But this text argues that it's actually speaking about the state of nature.
The text actually goes as far as claiming the mind doesn't even exist. There's a specific quote. "The past mind cannot be grasped. The present mind cannot be grasped. The future mind cannot be grasped."
Which is pretty radical.
Totally. And because of this, the author argues that traditional practices, things like reciting the Buddha's name, chanting sutras, fasting, keeping precepts, releasing animals, and prostrating, are totally useless if you don't see the nature.
It is a massive departure from conventional religious practice. Think about the countless hours, the lifelong dedication people have given to those exact rituals.
Yeah, years of their lives.
To understand the author's point, we have to look at the mechanics of what those rituals are trying to achieve. The author suggests that if you are performing these actions to cultivate a certain state of mind, you're chasing a ghost.
Because the mind is slipping away.
Exactly. The past is already gone, the future hasn't happened, and the present is constantly moving. So what mind are you actually trying to improve?
Okay, I want to make sure we're really getting this. Let's say you spend your whole life meticulously polishing a mirror. In this scenario, the mirror represents your mind, and the polishing represents all those rituals. The chanting, the fasting.
Right, all the effort.
Yeah. Then this text comes along and says, hey, the mirror doesn't even exist. You need to be looking at the light itself. So if the mirror doesn't exist, is the author suggesting that centuries of traditional practice are just a massive distraction?
That is precisely what is being argued. By stripping away performative religion, the chanting, the incense, the visible markers of being spiritual, the author forces the focus purely onto the intrinsic essence.
Wow.
The argument is that Buddha is not an external deity to pray to, nor a fleeting mental state to cultivate through discipline. Buddha is our deepest intrinsic nature. If you don't see that fundamental nature, the rituals are just empty motions performed by a non-existent mind.
Okay, so if we are supposed to stop polishing the imaginary mirror of the mind and start looking at nature, what exactly are we looking at? The text transitions into defining this nature, and the definition provided is incredibly intense.
It really is.
It describes a state of emptiness in just exhaustive detail.
Yeah, the text states that all dharma, meaning all phenomena or things in existence, is characterized by emptiness. Things neither arise nor cease. They are neither tainted nor pure.
But it goes much further than that, eliminating literally every sensory experience. The text says in this state there is no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind.
Nothing at all.
No forms, sounds, smells, tastes, touches. It even wipes out the spiritual goals. No suffering, no origination, no cessation, no path, no wisdom, and no attainment.
It is a systematic dismantling of every single point of reference a human being uses to understand reality. And from this total dismantling, the author deduces a grand equation unifying multiple, historically distinct philosophies.
Oh, right, the big equation.
Yeah, the text lays it out clearly. Emptiness equals formlessness, which equals selflessness, which equals ultimate nirvana, which equals the Elysium world, which equals Tao, which equals Buddha, which equals supercelestial being.
Let's pause right there because that is a massive collision of different spiritual frameworks. We have the Tao from Chinese philosophy, the Elysium world, and Buddha from distinct branches of Buddhism, the super celestial being. I mean, that is an overwhelming list of cross-cultural jargon.
It is a lot to take in at once.
How does the author bridge these completely different concepts into one single equation?
Well, the author is essentially stripping the cultural and historical baggage away from these words.
Yeah.
The argument is that different cultures and different spiritual traditions have used different vocabulary to point to the exact same underlying physics of reality.
So they're all talking about the same thing.
Exactly. Whether you call it the Tao, which is the natural flow of the universe, or ultimate nirvana, the destination is the same, a state entirely devoid of friction.
Okay, but I have to push back on this description of the destination. Wait, no senses, no mind, no wisdom, and no attainment. That sounds like a completely lifeless state of emptiness.
I know, it sounds pretty bleak on paper.
It's like turning off a television and staring at a blank gray screen forever. Why would anyone want to reach a state where literally everything is absent, let alone call it ultimate nirvana or the Elysium world?
What's fascinating here is that the author actually anticipates that exact reaction from you. Right after listing all those absences, the text explicitly says, "Doesn't this seem like a state of lifeless emptiness?" Wait a moment.
Huh. So they know it sounds terrible.
Yeah, they do. The author immediately defends against this critique by explaining the mechanism of suffering.
Tell me how wiping out my senses cures suffering without just, turning me into a style.
The logic in the text is that our senses, our mind, and our constant striving for wisdom and attainment are the very things that create friction. If you have eyes, you can see things you desire but cannot have.
Right. The want causes the pain.
Exactly. If you have a mind, you can worry about the future. By removing the attachment to these sensory inputs and mental constructs, you aren't left with a dead void. You are left with pure, unburdened existence. It's a state of great freedom and perfection in complete harmony with the natural flow of the universe.
I see the logic, but I'm still caught on the disconnect between the descriptions. Because the text asks a really practical question. What's the point of becoming a celestial being if the Elysium world is just empty?
Right.
If it's this great, harmonious state, why describe it in such bleak, negative terms?
This is where we have to distinguish between the map and the territory. The text resolves this apparent contradiction by stating that the Heart Sutra, or the Nature Sutra, does not describe the true scenery of the Elysian world. It only describes the path and the cognitive method to get there.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. So the sutra is essentially just the flight manual.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to look at it.
It tells you exactly how to operate the machinery, like which buttons to push and how to navigate the plane above the storm clouds. But it doesn't actually describe the gorgeous tropical island you're going to land on. We've been mistaking the instruction manual for the vacation.
Exactly. To push that analogy a step further, based on the author's logic, it's not even just a standard flight manual. It is a manual for dismantling the plane while you are still in the air, so you can learn to simply float.
Oh, wow. So you don't read it for the poetry.
No, you don't read a manual on dismantling an engine and expect poetic descriptions of a sunset. You read it to execute a highly technical process. The text argues that the sutra's true purpose is to urge the practitioner forward. It is a set of instructions saying, go, go, go. towards the other shore.
That reframes emptiness completely. It's not a bleak destination, it is the cognitive tool used to get there. But naturally, if the sutra is only the flight manual, you are going to wonder, what is the actual scenery of the destination? What does the tropical island actually look like?
To answer that, the author introduces the universal key we mentioned earlier, which is designed to unlock all the mysteries of the universe. This key consists of three components working together: structure, consciousness, and energy.
Let's break the mechanics of those down. What does the text mean by structure?
The text specifically refers to non-material structure. As long as non-material structure exists, there is consciousness to mobilize all the energy of the universe.
A non-material structure is a really tough concept to visualize. How does something have structure if it isn't, made of matter?
Think of it like software code in a computer, or maybe an architectural blueprint. The blueprint itself isn't a physical house, right?
Right, it's just paper or a digital file.
Exactly. It is a set of instructions. It's a non-material structure that dictates how energy and materials will be organized. The author is suggesting that emptiness is this underlying blueprint of the universe.
Okay, so it isn't a vacuum. It is the highly organized, non-material framework of reality. And then consciousness comes into play.
Yes. Consciousness acts like the builder reading the blueprint, or the electricity running through the software code. As long as consciousness exists to interact with that non-material structure, it mobilizes universal energy.
And that creates the universe.
Yes, it creates a universe full of vitality and vigor. This is the exact mechanism behind the ancient phrase, emptiness is form. Emptiness provides the structure, consciousness directs it, and energy manifests it as the vibrant reality we experience.
The concepts of structure, consciousness, and energy give us a working physics model for this philosophy, but the author brings it right back down to earth with a very practical analogy about a pineapple.
Yeah, the distinction between theory and firsthand experience is really central to this text.
The text points out that without firsthand experience, all knowledge is pale and inconclusive. It says theoretical knowledge is like a reflection in a mirror or the moon in water.
It's just an image of the thing, not the thing itself.
Exactly. Even if someone describes a pineapple to you in excruciating detail, the prickly exterior, the tartness, the exact chemical composition of its sweetness, you cannot truly understand its flavor until you physically take a bite yourself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a profound critique of purely intellectual spirituality. You can memorize the entire flight manual, you can perfectly understand the metaphysical interactions of structure, consciousness, and energy.
But you're still just reading about it.
Right. Intellectual understanding is just a detailed description of the pineapple. It doesn't actually nourish you.
So my immediate question is, how do we actually take a bite of emptiness? If we can't get there just by reading, and we've established that chanting and rituals are just polishing a non-existent mirror, what is the actual act of tasting it?
So the deep dive reveals that the way to taste emptiness, according to this text, is through totally forgetting oneself.
Forgetting oneself. I mean, that sounds so simple, but I imagine it's incredibly difficult. What does that actually look like in practice?
The purpose of forgetting oneself is to enter that state of emptiness, and the tangible result of that state is becoming completely relaxed and joyful. According to the author, this relaxation, this profound joy, that is the true scenery of the Elysium world.
So it's not a physical place with golden gates.
No, it is the lived experience of being entirely free from the burden of the self.
To achieve this, the author points to specific entry-level practices. The text refers to the 8 methods detailed in another of the author's works, called The Free Holy Land, The Extinction and Emptiness of Form of Dharma.
We really need to look closely at that title to understand the mechanism of these methods. The extinction and emptiness of form. In this context, a form is any label or identity you attach to yourself.
So forms aren't just physical objects. Forms are like my job title, my social status, my anxieties about the future, my opinions.
Exactly. When the text talks about methods for the extinction of form, it is talking about the active structural unlearning of those identities.
Unlearning who you think you are.
Yeah. Forgetting yourself means methodically untethering your consciousness from those labels. When you stop identifying as your stress or your achievements or your failures, the heavy armor of the ego drops away.
And the friction disappears.
Right. The resulting feeling of lightness and joy is what the author calls tasting the pineapple.
The author leaves us with one final paradox to wrap our heads around. Because if you think about it, saying emptiness is the Elysium world, while simultaneously saying emptiness does not describe the true scenery of the Elysium world, Seems entirely contradictory. It sounds like doublespeak.
It does seem contradictory until the author clarifies it with one last analogy. An apple is a fruit, but a fruit is not necessarily an apple.
Let's make sure that is crystal clear. Emptiness is the category, the fundamental condition like the word fruit. It is the required state of being for the Elysium world to exist.
Yes, that's the structure.
But the actual experience of the Elysium world, the joy, the relaxation, the vitality you feel when you let go of your ego, that is the specific apple.
That is the perfect way to frame it. The category of fruit does not describe the taste, the crunch, or the sweetness of a specific apple. In the same way, the technical framework of emptiness does not describe the vibrant, lived reality of the Elysium world.
Because it's just the framework.
Emptiness is the necessary non-material structure. But the lived experience of that structure, mobilized by your consciousness, is dynamic and joyful.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? I have to raise a final philosophical pushback here. If the ultimate scenery of nirvana is simply being completely relaxed and joyful by forgetting yourself, isn't it wildly ironic that we have to try so hard, read so many complex texts, and study 8 methods just to remember how to let go?
It is deeply ironic.
Yeah.
But think about the world you operate in daily. We are surrounded by information overload. We are constantly pressured to define ourselves through our careers, our social media presence, our political opinions, and our personal brands.
We're constantly building up the ego.
Right. We construct incredibly rigid, heavy identities just to navigate modern society. In that context, unlearning and forgetting the self is not a passive act. It requires active, intentional dismantling.
It's hard work.
Learning to truly relax, to exist without the heavy armor of the ego, might just be the most difficult and most rewarding task a human being can undertake.
So the work isn't in building something new to become enlightened. The work is in dismantling what's already there so you can finally see the light instead of the mirror. Let's briefly recap the journey we've taken through this text.
It's been quite a ride.
It really has. We started by taking a sledgehammer to traditional interpretations, stripping away the illusion of the mind to focus entirely on our intrinsic nature. We redefined emptiness, moving it from a bleak, gray void into a highly structured, functional flight manual designed to get us above the storm clouds.
We explored how structure, consciousness, and energy weave reality together.
And finally, we learned that ultimate nirvana isn't an empty room. It is tasted through the pineapple of joyful self-forgetting and the extinction of our rigid identities.
This raises an important question, and it's a thought I want to leave you with today. If true enlightenment requires you to taste the pineapple firsthand rather than just reading the flight manual, what pineapples in your own life have you only been studying from afar?
Are you mistaking the menu for the meal in your own daily pursuits of happiness? Intellectualizing your experiences instead of actually living them? That is a question that demands some real reflection. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is just put down the menu, stop analyzing the ingredients, and finally take a bite.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, stay curious, and maybe try to forget yourself just a little bit today.